Marcus Reynolds stood across the street from the Silver Bean coffee shop, his worn boots scuffing against the cracked sidewalk of Silver Lake, Los Angeles. The evening sun cast long shadows across the street, but nothing could darken the gleam of the motorcycle that had caught his eye. It was the most beautiful machine he had ever seen, an Arch KRGT1, its black and chrome finish practically glowing in the golden hour light. His hands, rough from years of mechanical work, twitched at his sides. Just 3 weeks ago, those same hands had held his final paycheck from Jimmy's auto shop. "Sorry, kid," Jimmy had said, not meeting his eyes. "Business is slow, and I can't keep everyone on." Marcus had been the newest hire, so he was the first to go. Now, those skilled hands held only an eviction notice, crumpled in his jacket pocket. 2 months behind on rent, with bill collectors calling every day. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably another debt collector. He ignored it. The motorcycle stood there, almost inviting him. Marcus knew bikes. It was his specialty at Jimmy's. This wasn't just any motorcycle. This was an Arch, worth at least $80,000. The kind of bike most mechanics only read about in magazines. The kind that could solve all his problems if he sold it for even half its value. He watched as people walked in and out of the coffee shop, his heart pounding harder with each passing minute. The bike's owner must be inside. Marcus crossed the street, trying to look casual, like any other bike enthusiast admiring a dream machine. Up close, it was even more impressive. The craftsmanship was incredible, every detail perfect, from the custom leather seat to the hand-stitched grips. A quick glance through the coffee shop's window showed a busy scene inside. The evening crowd was picking up, people stopping for their after-work caffeine fix. Marcus couldn't see who might own the bike, but whoever it was seemed distracted enough. His mind raced with calculations. He knew these bikes, knew their security systems. With his experience, he could bypass it in minutes. There was a quiet alley 3 blocks away where his friend Tony ran a chop shop. Tony never asked questions about where parts came from. Marcus wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans. This wasn't him. He fixed bikes. He didn't steal them. But then he felt the eviction notice crinkle in his pocket again. His little sister's voice echoed in his head from their call last night. "You okay for rent this month, big brother? I can send you some money." He lied, told her everything was fine. He couldn't take money from his sister, who was working 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school. The sun dipped lower, and the street lights began to flicker on. It was now or never. Marcus pulled his baseball cap lower over his eyes and moved closer to the bike. His hands knew what to do, even as his conscience screamed at him to stop. In smooth, practiced movements, he accessed the wiring beneath the seat. The security system was sophisticated, but nothing he hadn't handled before during legitimate repairs. His heart nearly stopped when the bike's lights flashed once, but no alarms sounded. The engine purred to life, quiet and powerful. Marcus swung his leg over the seat, feeling the premium leather against his worn jeans. The machine felt alive beneath him, like a creature of metal and thunder just waiting to run. With one final look at the coffee shop's window, Marcus saw only the usual crowd of customers. No one was rushing out. No one had noticed. His hands stopped shaking as they gripped the handlebars. This was it, one moment of madness that could either save or destroy him. He pulled away from the curb smoothly, keeping his speed normal, resisting the urge to race away. Only when he was 3 blocks away did he let the bike show its power, accelerating through the darkening streets of Los Angeles. The wind whipped at his jacket, and the engine's growl echoed off the buildings around him. He felt powerful, unstoppable, and more terrified than he'd ever been in his life. What Marcus didn't notice in his adrenaline-fueled escape was the small GPS tracker blinking steadily under the bike's frame, or the security camera above the coffee shop that had captured his face in perfect clarity. And he certainly didn't know that the bike's owner was someone who would change his life forever. For better or worse. Marcus rode through the darkening streets of Los Angeles, his mind racing faster than the stolen motorcycle beneath him. Every red light felt like torture, forcing him to stop and sit exposed. Each time a police car passed, his chest tightened until he could barely breathe. But he kept his speed steady, knowing that speeding would only draw attention. Tony's garage was still 15 minutes away, hidden in a maze of industrial buildings where questions were never asked and answers were paid for in cash. The bike purred beneath him, running so smoothly it felt like floating. Marcus had worked on hundreds of motorcycles, but nothing had ever felt like this. It was like riding a cloud made of thunder. His phone buzzed again in his pocket. Without taking his eyes off the road, he knew it was probably his sister calling to check on him. The thought made his stomach twist. What would she think if she knew what he was doing right now? His sister, who had always looked up to him, who had bragged to her friends about her big brother, the motorcycle mechanic. Now he was just another thief. A car humped behind him, snapping him back to reality. The light had turned green. Marcus accelerated carefully, following the route he had planned in his head. Left at the warehouse district, right past the old factory, then 3 blocks to Tony's place. Simple. Easy. Just like stealing the bike had been easy, thanks to his years of experience. The thought made him feel sick. The industrial district loomed ahead, its empty buildings casting long shadows in the growing darkness. Marcus slowed down as he turned into the familiar alley behind Tony's garage. The place looked closed, but he knew better. Tony's real business happened after dark. Marcus pulled up to the steel door and knocked 3 times, then twice more. Tommy's signal. The door creaked open, and Tony's round face appeared in the gap. His small eyes widened when he saw the bike. "Holy shit, Marcus," Tony whispered, quickly pulling the door open wider. "Get that thing in here now." Marcus guided the motorcycle into the dimly lit garage. The place smelled like oil and cigarettes, with parts from dozens of other bikes scattered across workbenches. Tony closed the door behind them, his hands shaking as he lit a cigarette. "Do you know what this is?" Tony asked, walking around the bike. "This is an arch, man. These things are like unicorns. Nobody steals an arch. Nobody's crazy enough to try." "I know what it is," Marcus said quietly, still sitting on the bike. Now that he had stopped moving, his legs felt too weak to stand. "I need to sell it. Parts, whole, whatever. I just need the money." Tony took a long drag of his cigarette, the ember glowing bright in the dark garage. "This isn't like stealing a Honda, Marcus. People who own these bikes, they have connections. They have money. They can make problems for people like us." Marcus finally slid off the bike, his legs trembling. "I don't have a choice, Tony. I need this. Just tell me you can help." Tony walked over to his computer, tapping a few keys. The screen lit up his face with a pale blue glow. "Give me an hour to make some calls, but we need to strip it tonight. Something this hot. We can't sit on it." As Tony made his calls, Marcus walked around the bike, really looking at it for the first time. The craftsmanship was incredible. Every piece was perfect, custom-made with care and attention that put regular bikes to shame. He noticed small details he had missed before. The way the leather was hand-stitched, the custom engravings on the engine case. Then he saw something that made his blood freeze. There, on the engine case, was a small signature engraved in the metal. Marcus leaned closer, his hands starting to shake again. He knew that signature. Everyone knew that signature. "Tony," Marcus called out, his voice cracking. "We have a problem. A big problem." "What now?" Tony asked, looking up from his phone. "I think." Marcus swallowed hard. "I think I just stole Keanu Reeves' personal motorcycle." The cigarette fell from Tony's open mouth, scattering ashes across the concrete floor. Keanu Reeves stepped out of the Silver Bean coffee shop, carrying 2 cups of coffee. One was for himself, and the other was for the young barista who had just shared her story about struggling to pay for art school. The evening air had grown cooler, and the street lights now illuminated the sidewalk where his arch motorcycle should have been. He stopped mid-step, the coffee cup still warm in his hands. The space where his bike had been parked now sat empty, looking strangely small without the powerful machine filling it. For a moment, he simply stared at the empty spot, his face calm despite the situation. A young woman hurried out of the coffee shop behind him. "Mr. Reeves, you forgot your change." She stopped when she saw his expression. "Is everything okay?" "The bike," he said quietly, still looking at the empty space. "Did you happen to see anyone near it?" The barista's eyes widened as she realized what had happened. "Oh my God, I'll call the police right away." "No need for that just yet," Keanu said, his voice remaining steady. He handed both coffee cups back to her. "Could you hold these for a moment?" He pulled out his phone and pressed a single number on speed dial. The call was answered on the first ring. "Hey, Mark." "Yeah, it's me. The bike's been taken." He listened for a moment, a slight smile appearing on his face. "No, don't call the police yet. Can you send me the GPS location?" The barista watched in amazement as Keanu calmly had this conversation, as if discussing the weather rather than a stolen motorcycle worth more than most people's homes. He glanced up at the security camera above the coffee shop entrance, then back down at his phone as a message came through. "Got it," he said into the phone. "Send me the security footage too. I want to see who we're dealing with." Another pause. "No, I want to handle this personally. Something doesn't feel right about this one." The barista couldn't contain herself any longer. "But Mr. Reeves, shouldn't we call the police? That bike must be worth a fortune." Keanu ended his call and turned to her with a gentle smile. "Sometimes people make mistakes because they're desperate, not because they're bad." He took one of the coffee cups back from her. "The bike has a GPS tracker, and I have a feeling about this situation. Trust me." His phone buzzed again. This time it was a video file from the security camera. Keanu watched it carefully, noting how the thief had examined the bike with obvious expertise. This wasn't some random criminal. The man's movements show years of experience with motorcycles. He had handled the bike with care, even while stealing it. "Interesting," Keanu muttered, watching the video again. "He knows bikes. Look at how he handles the wiring. That's professional training." The barista peered at his phone screen. "You sound almost impressed." "Skill is skill," Keanu replied, zooming in on the thief's face, "even when it's used wrongly." He noticed something else, the way the man had kept checking his pocket, where something seemed to be crumpled up. The way his shoulders had been tense, not with the excitement of theft, but with the weight of desperation. His phone buzzed once more. The GPS tracker was showing the bike's location, stopped in an industrial area known for its auto shops. Keanu nodded to himself, as if confirming something he had already suspected. "What are you going to do?" the barista asked, still holding the second coffee cup. Keanu took a last sip of his coffee and handed the empty cup back to her. "I'm going to go meet someone who's probably having one of the worst nights of his life." He started walking toward his car, which was parked around the corner. "And maybe, if I'm right about him, we can turn this into something good." "But what if you're wrong?" she called after him. "What if he's dangerous?" Keanu turned back with that famous gentle smile of his. "In my experience, the most dangerous people aren't the ones stealing motorcycles to survive. They're the ones who have everything and still want more." With that, he disappeared around the corner, leaving the barista standing there with an empty coffee cup and a story nobody would ever believe. Back in Tony's garage, Marcus sat on an old wooden stool, his head in his hands. The stolen Arch motorcycle seemed to mock him from where it stood in the center of the workspace, its chrome surfaces reflecting the dim overhead lights. Tony paced back and forth, chain-smoking his third cigarette in the last 15 minutes. "We need to get rid of it," Tony said, his voice shaking. "Right now, tonight. Push it into the ocean if we have to." Marcus looked up, his face pale. "The ocean? This isn't just some stolen bike anymore, Tony. This is Keanu Reeves' personal motorcycle, from his own company." He stood up and walked over to the bike, pointing at the signature he had discovered. "Look at this. This isn't just a regular Arch bike. This has custom modifications. It's probably one of a kind." Tony stopped pacing and leaned against his workbench. "That makes it worse, you idiot. Regular bikes, we can strip and sell, but this? Every part is traceable. Every piece is custom. We can't sell any of it." Marcus pulled out his phone and started searching online. His hands trembled as he typed Keanu Reeves' Arch motorcycle into the search bar. The results made his stomach sink even further. "Oh God," he whispered, scrolling through articles and videos. "He doesn't just own the company. He helped design these bikes. He works with the mechanics. Marcus paused, watching a video of Keanu talking about his love for motorcycles. He actually cares about this stuff. Tony grabbed the phone from Marcus's hands. "Who cares if he cares? He's still going to kill us. Or worse, sue us into next century." But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He was watching an interview playing on Tony's small TV in the corner, which was always turned to motorcycle racing channels. It was an old clip of Keanu Reeves talking about his charity work, about giving away millions to children's hospitals, about treating film crew members like family. "Did you know he gave away most of his Matrix earnings to the special effects team?" Marcus said quietly. "Said they were the real heroes of the movie." "Are you fanboying over him right now?" Tony nearly screamed. The guy whose bike you just stole. Marcus walked around the motorcycle again, but this time with different eyes. He noticed the worn grips, showing how much the bike had been ridden and loved. The carefully maintained engine, the custom touches that showed hours of passionate work. This wasn't just a rich man's toy. This was something special. His phone buzzed in his pocket, another call from his sister. This time, Marcus answered it. "Hey, Sarah," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Marcus, I've been trying to reach you all night. Are you okay?" He looked at the stolen bike, at Tony's panicked face, at his own reflection in the garage's dirty window. "No," he said finally. "No, I'm not okay. I did something really stupid." "What? What happened? Do you need help?" Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. "I messed up, Sarah. Really bad. But—" he took a deep breath. "I think I know how to fix it. Or at least I have to try." "You're scaring me, Marcus. What's going on?" "I'll call you back tomorrow, okay? I promise. And Sarah, I'm sorry I lied about the rent. About everything." He hung up before she could answer, then turned to Tony. "I'm taking the bike back." "Are you crazy?" Tony grabbed his arm. "You'll go to jail." "Maybe," Marcus said, looking at the motorcycle. "But you know what's crazy? Stealing from probably the only billionaire in Hollywood who might actually understand why someone would do this. Who might actually care." Tony threw his hands up in defeat. "You've lost your mind. The fame got to you, just from stealing his bike." Marcus swung his leg over the motorcycle, starting it up. The engine's purr filled the garage. "No, Tony, I think I just found my mind again." He looked at his friend. "Don't wait up. Whatever happens next, this is on me, not you." As Marcus rode out of the garage into the night, he didn't notice the black car parked across the street, or the figure watching him from behind tinted windows. Marcus couldn't sleep that night. He sat in his small apartment, the eviction notice still crumpled in his jacket pocket, watching video after video about Keanu Reeves on his old laptop. The stolen motorcycle waited in the parking lot behind his building, covered with a tarp. Every passing car made him jump, thinking it was the police. The sun was rising when he finally closed his laptop. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but his mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. He had spent the whole night learning about the man whose bike he had stolen, and each story hit him harder than the last. There was the time Keanu had bought all the special effects team their own Harley-Davidson motorcycles. The countless stories of him giving up his seat on the subway, eating lunch with homeless people, and treating movie crew members like family. The millions he had donated to children's hospitals, never asking for recognition. Marcus walked to his kitchen window and looked down at the covered bike in the parking lot. In the early morning light, it looked like a sleeping giant under the tarp. His phone showed 15 missed calls, 5 from Tony, 10 from his sister Sarah. He picked up his phone and called Sarah back. She answered on the first ring. "Marcus, where have you been? What's going on?" "Sarah," his voice cracked a little. "Remember when we were kids, and Dad caught me stealing that candy bar from the grocery store?" "What? That was like 20 years ago." "Yeah, but remember what he did? He didn't yell or punish me. He made me go back and apologize to the store owner. Made me work there every Saturday for a month to pay it back." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, what did you do?" "I messed up, sis. Really messed up. But Dad was right back then. The only way to fix a mistake is to face it head on." "You're scaring me. Do you need money? I can help." "No," Marcus cut her off. "No more helping me. It's time I faced my problems myself. I needed to hear your voice first, to remind me that I'm not the kind of person who runs away from his mistakes. Whatever it is, we can figure it out together." Marcus wiped his eyes. "Not this time, but I promise I'll explain everything soon. I love you, sis." He hung up before she could argue and walked to his closet. Inside, hung with care, was his old work uniform from Jimmy's auto shop. He put it on slowly, remembering all the honest days of work it represented. The name patch was still there. Marcus, Master Mechanic. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Tony. "Police everywhere. Looking for the bike. You're dead if they find you." Marcus deleted the message. He had already made up his mind. Walking to his small kitchen table, he sat down and began to write on a piece of paper. "Dear Mr. Reeves." I'm the person who stole your motorcycle last night. I could give you a lot of excuses. Lost my job, facing eviction, desperate for money. But the truth is simpler. I did something wrong, really wrong. I spent all night learning about you. Not the movie star you, but the real you. The guy who gives without asking for credit. Who treats everyone with respect. Who probably worked as hard designing those amazing bikes as you did on any movie. I'm taking the bike back to the coffee shop this morning. I know the police are probably waiting. I know there will be consequences. But I learned something from watching all those videos about you. Sometimes doing the right thing is more important than avoiding punishment. I'm sorry. Not just for stealing the bike, but for betraying everything I was taught about honesty and hard work. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that. Marcus Reynolds. He folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket. Through his window, he could see the first real sunlight hitting the covered motorcycle. It was time. Marcus grabbed his keys and walked down to the parking lot, his steps heavy but determined. As he pulled the tarp off the bike, the morning sun made the chrome shine like new money. But for the first time since he stole it, Marcus didn't see dollar signs. He saw craftsmanship, passion, and his own reflection looking back at him. It was time to make things right. The morning streets of Los Angeles were quieter than the night before as Marcus rode the arch motorcycle back toward the Silver Bean coffee shop. Every mile felt like a lifetime, his heart pounding harder as he got closer to his destination. The letter to Keanu Reeves sat heavy in his pocket, slightly crumpled from his nervous fidgeting. He had chosen to return at the same time as yesterday, early morning, when the coffee shop was just opening. The street looked different in the morning light. Fewer people, clearer heads. As he turned the final corner, Marcus's hands tightened on the handlebars. There were no police cars waiting. No sirens. Just a black car parked across from the coffee shop. And there, sitting at one of the outdoor tables with 2 coffee cups in front of him, was Keanu Reeves himself. Marcus almost turned around. His whole body screamed at him to run. But then he remembered his father's words from so long ago. Son, running from a mistake only makes it bigger. Taking a deep breath, he guided the motorcycle into the same parking spot where he had stolen it just yesterday. Keanu didn't move from his seat. He just watched, his face calm and unreadable, as Marcus turned off the engine. The morning was so quiet that Marcus could hear birds singing somewhere nearby. It felt surreal, like a dream where everything moves in slow motion. With shaking hands, Marcus pulled off his helmet. He could feel sweat running down his back despite the cool morning air. The letter in his pocket suddenly felt childish and inadequate. How do you apologize for stealing someone's prized possession? What words could possibly make this right? Good morning, Keanu said quietly, his voice carrying easily in the empty street. Would you like some coffee? Marcus stood frozen, still straddling the bike. This wasn't how he had expected this to go. Where were the police? The angry accusations? The consequences he had spent all night preparing himself for? I brought your bike back, Marcus managed to say, his voice barely a whisper. I can see that. Keanu gestured to the empty chair across from him. The coffee's getting cold. Mooking like a man in a trance, Marcus walked over to the table. His legs felt like they might give out at any moment. As he got closer, he could see that Keanu was wearing a simple black jacket and jeans, looking more like a regular guy having morning coffee than a movie star worth millions. Mr. Reeves, Marcus started, reaching for the letter in his pocket. Just Keanu is fine, he interrupted gently. And before you say anything else, I'd like to tell you what I know. Marcus sank into the empty chair, nodding slowly. I know you're Marcus Reynolds, age 28, former master mechanic at Jimmy's auto shop until they had to downsize 3 weeks ago. No criminal record. Started working on bikes when you were 16, helping to support your sister Sarah through nursing school. Currently 2 months behind on rent. Marcus stared at him, mouth slightly open. How did you? I have good people who work for me, Keanu said, taking a sip of his coffee. They spent the night learning everything about you while you spent the night learning about me. He smiled slightly. Yes, I know about all the videos you watched. My security team is very thorough. The police? Marcus started. Aren't coming, Keanu finished. At least, not unless you and I can have an honest conversation right now. He pushed the second coffee cup toward Marcus. So, what do you say? ready to talk about why a master mechanic with no criminal record decided to steal a motorcycle worth more than most houses. Marcus looked at the coffee cup, then back at Keanu's patient face. The street around them was starting to wake up, but in that moment, it felt like they were the only two people in Los Angeles. Slowly, Marcus pulled the crumpled letter from his pocket and placed it on the table. Actually, he said quietly, I wrote down everything I wanted to say. Keanu picked up the crumpled letter from the table, taking his time to read it carefully. The morning sun was growing stronger, casting long shadows across their small table outside the Silver Bean. Marcus sat perfectly still, his coffee getting cold in front of him, watching Keanu's face as he read. Finally, Keanu folded the letter and placed it carefully in his jacket pocket. You have good handwriting, he said softly. Marcus almost laughed from the nervousness. Of all the things he had expected Keanu to say, that wasn't one of them. My dad, Marcus found himself saying, he always told me that neat handwriting shows respect for the person you're writing to. Smart man, your father. Keanu picked up his coffee cup. Tell me about him. Marcus gripped his own cup, more for something to hold on to than to drink. He was a mechanic too, taught me everything I know about bikes. Passed away 5 years ago, heart attack while working in his shop. He paused, then added, he would have hated what I did last night. But he would have loved how you handled this morning, Keanu replied, gesturing at the motorcycle. Coming back takes more courage than running away. A young woman walked past their table, did a double take at seeing Keanu, then hurried into the coffee shop. Through the window, they could see her excitedly telling the baristas. We probably don't have much time before people start gathering, Keanu said. So let's talk about what happens next. Marcus straightened in his chair, preparing himself. I'll accept whatever consequences there are. I know what I did was wrong. The consequences, Keanu said, leaning forward slightly, aren't always what we expect them to be. He pulled out his phone and showed Marcus a photo. Do you know what this is? Marcus looked at the screen. It showed a garage workspace, clean and professional, with several Arch motorcycles in various stages of assembly. That's the Arch Motorcycle Workshop, he said, his voice filled with recognition. Yes, and we're looking for a new master mechanic. Keanu put his phone away. Someone who knows bikes inside and out. Someone who cares about the craftsmanship, not just the paycheck. Marcus's mouth fell open. You can't be serious. I'm always serious about motorcycles, Keanu replied with a small smile, but there are conditions. Conditions? Marcus could barely get the word out. 3 of them, Keanu counted on his fingers. First, you'll start at the bottom. No shortcuts. You'll need to earn the trust of every person in that shop. Marcus nodded quickly. Of course, absolutely. Second, Keanu continued, you'll spend your weekends for the next year teaching motorcycle maintenance at the youth center downtown. Kids who might be where you were yesterday need to see where you are today. Yes, I can do that. And third, Keanu's voice grew more serious, you need to call your sister right now and tell her everything. No more lies, no more hiding your struggles. Family is too important to push away. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. Why would you do this for someone who stole from you? Keanu was quiet for a moment, looking at the motorcycle that had brought them together. Because 30 years ago, someone gave me a second chance when I needed it most. That's how life works. We pass on the good things that others do for us. He stood up as a small crowd began to gather nearby, people noticing who was sitting at the coffee shop. The job starts Monday at 8 a.m. Don't be late. He placed a business card on the table. And Marcus? Yes. The bike you stole. You'll be the one restoring it. Every scratch, every fingerprint, every mark from last night, you'll make it perfect again. Think you can handle that? Marcus picked up the business card with trembling hands, looking at the Arch Motorcycle logo. Yes, sir. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Keanu said, putting on his sunglasses. Because you're not just fixing the bike, you're fixing yourself. He started walking toward his car, then turned back. Oh, and Marcus? Keep the coffee cup. Something to remind you of the morning everything changed. 6 months had passed since that morning at the Silver Bean coffee shop. The Arch Motorcycle Workshop hummed with activity as Marcus carefully polished the last restored piece of Keanu's motorcycle. He had spent countless hours working on it, staying late after his regular shifts, making sure every detail was perfect. The same bike he had stolen that desperate night now gleamed under the workshop lights, looking even better than before. Marcus had replaced every part he had damaged, restored every scratch, and added a few subtle improvements that only a master mechanic would notice. The coffee cup from that life-changing morning sat on his workbench, now used for holding small tools. "Looking good, Reynolds," said Mike, the head mechanic, walking past with an approving nod. It had taken 2 months of hard work before Mike had started calling him by his last name, a sign of acceptance in the workshop. "The boss is coming in today to see it." Marcus wiped his hands on a clean cloth, stepping back to look at his work. The chrome surfaces reflected the overhead lights like mirrors. He had memorized every inch of this machine, every curve and connection. It wasn't just a motorcycle anymore. It was his redemption story in metal and chrome. The workshop door opened, and Keanu walked in, dressed casually in his riding gear. The other mechanics nodded respectfully and continued their work, used to his regular visits by now. He walked straight to Marcus's workspace, his eyes fixed on the restored motorcycle. "Well," Keanu said, walking slowly around the bike, "let's see what you've done." Marcus stood quietly as Keanu inspected every detail. He watched as his boss ran experienced hands over the engine casing, checked the suspension, and examined the custom modifications. Finally, Keanu looked up with a slight smile. "You added the new suspension system we were testing." "Yes," Marcus nodded. "And I adjusted the handlebar angle by 2 degrees. You always leaned slightly right when you rode it before. This should feel more natural." Keanu's smile widened. "You noticed that, huh?" He swung his leg over the seat and started the engine. The bike purred to life. It sounded smoother than ever. "Perfect." "There's something else," Marcus said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out his old employee badge from Jimmy's auto shop. "I've been meaning to give you this, to put behind the number plate, like a signature, so everyone knows who worked on it." "Keep it," Keanu said, turning off the bike. "You might need it." "Need it? For what?" "The youth center called this morning. 2 of your students want to apply for apprenticeships here." Keanu got off the bike. "They'll need a teacher. Someone who knows both the mechanics of motorcycles and the mechanics of second chances." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "You want me to train them?" "You've earned it. Mike says you're the best restoration expert he's seen in years." Keanu reached into his jacket and pulled out a new badge. "Which is why we're promoting you to lead restoration specialist, starting today." Marcus took the badge with trembling hands. His name was printed in gold letters, with the Arch motorcycle logo beneath it. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything. Just keep doing what you're doing." Keanu pulled out his keys. "Now, how about we take this bike for a test ride? I know a good coffee shop nearby." As they rode through the streets of Los Angeles, Marcus on his work bike and Keanu on the restored Arch, Marcus thought about that desperate night 6 months ago. He thought about choices, consequences, and the strange ways life sometimes offers redemption. They pulled up at the Silver Bean, parking in the same spots as that morning that changed everything. The same barista was working, and she smiled in recognition as they walked in. "The usual?" she asked, already reaching for cups. "2 coffees," Keanu nodded, then turned to Marcus. "Ready to talk about those apprentices?" Marcus looked at his new badge, then at the restored motorcycle outside, and finally at the man who had given him the second chance. "Ready," he said, and for the first time in his life, he truly was.